good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our Canadian colleagues. Welcome to our EU-Canada Alignment on Digital Credential, Identity and Trust Services event. Let's wait just a few seconds for people to join the event. Okay, I think we can start. Hi, everyone. I'm Luigi Colucci from the Instar project, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this event organized by the Instar project, which brings together experts from Europe and from Canada to work together on alignment on digital credential and trusted services. This is going to be a very good event. We expect a lot of insights. Without further ado, I will pass the floor to the first speaker, which is Gabriele Bertolli, Deputy Head of Unit for the European Commission. Please, Gabriele. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luigi, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. And I would really like to welcome on behalf of the European Commission all the participants, both from Canada and from the EU. I know you represent public administration, private sector. We're really, really happy to gather again, to follow, especially to follow our very fruitful discussions and to bring them forward. The topic of digital credentials and digital identity is a topic that, as you all know, is growing in our bilateral relations and also within our respective countries. So it's really a topical moment to discuss. And we are having this discussion in a broader context, which is the one of the EU-Canada digital partnerships. As you know, it was launched in 2023 by President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Trudeau. And this really is a key instrument for us from the European Union side to work with Canada, which is, of course, a very much like-minded country on digital issues and tech. Goes without saying that we are united by shared values and common challenges. That I think is very clear. And indeed, is a good moment and a good possibility to make connections, to share expertise on this very important subject. The digital partnership goes well beyond information exchanges. It really covers a number of initiatives on digital economy. It's really a collaboration vehicle to have very, very concrete deliverables in the many areas that it covers. And I think it has brought already quite many achievements in just this last couple of years. When we adopted it, we really committed together to not only exchange information, including on digital identity and digital credentials and trust services, but really to bring this cooperation forward in a very, very concrete manner. And that's why we're here today to discuss it. We also precisely discussed to launch and develop pilot projects leading towards interoperability, really paving the way for possible mutual recognition. We agreed that our cooperation in international standards is extremely useful in that respect to support the development of human-centric digital identity and digital credentials. So this, I think, we can all agree that will be the next steps in our cooperation. I conclude by saying that our discussion and its outcomes will also feed into the conclusions of a ministerial level digital partnership council, which we hope will happen very shortly in the coming months between our Executive Vice President Virkkunen and the Canadian Minister of Industry, and it will happen in Canada. So the date remains to be confirmed, but we are very glad to have this opportunity in the coming months. So with that said, really, I just wanted to wish us all very fruitful discussions, and I pass the floor already to my colleague Carlos, who will be giving more of a technical introduction to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriele, and thank you for this introduction. And again, colleagues online, both from the EU and Canadian side, thank you for your participation today. So I'm Carlos Lopez. I'm the project officer responsible for the project Instar, and I'm happy to be here and to have this webinar in place. So I would like to go a bit more into detail about Instar and the dual role that Instar have in supporting both the European standardization strategy and the EU-Canada digital partnership. As you know, standardization, and especially digital standardization, has become a matter of geopolitical interest in recent years. And the EU standardization strategy, which was published in 2022, recognizes this factor as one of its pillars. Indeed, one of the pillars is to promote the EU leadership and influence in international standardization. And the idea is to shape international standards in line with our values and interests, and also to promote the competitiveness, a very important word now, of our industry. But of course, one of the strong component of this goal is to align and join efforts with like-minded partners that share our common values and interests, as Gabriele was mentioning before. And of course, Canada is one of our closest allies, as it is evident if you look at the current political situation, and of course, as it is clearly reflected in the EU-Canada digital partnership. In this partnership, we have agreed to work together in crucial topics like AI, cybersecurity, data, and of course, digital identities as well. And all these areas, looking into the technical level, in one way or another, they all go down to standardization at some point. So Instar, again, is very important for us to support the implementation of these two political initiatives, the standardization strategy and the EU-Canada digital partnership. And Instar is a coordination and support action, which is funded by the EU under Horizon Europe. And its mission is to promote alignment with like-minded partners on a common vision for digital standardization of key emerging technologies. And this can be done in several ways. One way is what we are doing today, exchange of best practices and activities in both sides, in this case of the Atlantic, but also could be with the development or adoption of common standards, or aligning on common positions in international standardization bodies. So there are several ways to bring together this cooperation, right? And Instar does that, setting up European and international task forces that bring together real standardization experts in several ICT areas. So the geographical scope of Instar covers Canada, but also other places like US, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Australia, and Taiwan. And it is organized in 6 technology work streams that cover different technologies like AI, data, cybersecurity, and electronic identity are together, and they are responsible for the organization of this webinar. Also quantum, IoT, cloud edge, and connectivity in general, more 5G and 6G. So thank you again for your participation. And now I will pass the floor to my colleague Vicente, which will finalize the introduction with a recap of previous work that has been done between the EU and Canada on this topic area. Thank you.
Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon. I am Vicente Andreu. I am a policy officer in DigiConnect H4 unit, that is, its name is e-Government and Trust, and we are basically working on the development of the new EU digital identity framework. This is not the first occasion in which Canada and EU talk together on digital identity, digital credential trust services. Back in 2021, as part of the Canada-EU dialogue, there were a series of workshops took place, and the objective of the workshop was to develop recommendations for advancing towards cross-border interoperability and mutual acceptance on digital credentials. These workshops also allowed us to assess the status, the state of the art of the technology, and also the policy and regulatory landscapes related to digital identities and digital credentials in both jurisdictions. And we tried to identify together areas of overlap, different gaps that needed to be addressed to facilitate interoperability. And based on the discussions that took place during these workshops, a set of recommendations was developed with the objective of guiding future work in this area. Those recommendations, for instance, included, among other things, the development of joint use cases and pilot projects towards interoperability of digital identity and digital credentials and trust services, building the EU, building on the basis of the EU and Canada's respective frameworks. For instance, a project using the European blockchain services infrastructure on academic credentials was developed between the EU and Canada. Its goal was to demonstrate technical interoperability for issuing, holding, and verifying digital credentials in EPSI digital wallets. In 2023, also, the NGI Sargasso project on transatlantic cooperation was launched, and it had the aim of developing and testing and improving digital credential products, services, and technologies. During this same workshop, our colleagues in the Next Generation Internet Unit will provide more detailed information on this project and its outcomes. But the truth is that, at least on the EU side, the regulations, the regulatory framework has changed very recently. The previous EIDA regulation was amended in May 2024, and a new digital identity framework is currently in force. We are still completing this framework with a broad set of secondary regulations, a broad set of implementing acts. We expect to finalize that by in the first half of 2025. These implementing acts establish specifications and technical requirements for the EU digital identity framework and for the trust services that are covered by our regulation. And it's specifically important in the development of these implementing acts, as mentioned, contain the technical specification and technical requirements, the effort that we are doing on standardization. Later today, also, we will try to introduce you to the standardization strategy that we have been developing. And I think that's all from my side. We will be glad to continue our cooperation with Canada on the basis of the new regulation and continue with this standardization effort that we can develop jointly. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, if we have the colleague Paolo De Rosa, otherwise we go to the next session.
We can go to the first session. Paolo will
Perfect.
intervene afterwards in
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you for the first session. Thank you for this welcoming session. Now
Yes.
we'll move on to actually let me okay, so continuing, we're going now to have an introduction to the governments of Canada approach to digital credentials, and the speaker for this session will be Paul Jackson, which is the Director of Government of Canada Issue and Verify at the Canadian Digital Service. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. I will just quickly share my. Do I have the ability to share my screen for this update?
Yeah, let me just give it to you. Okay, please.
Okay. So are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah, this is good to hear some of the history of the work we've done together. I definitely do recall those workshops that we did in 2021, as well as the work on the technical interoperability for academic credentials. I'm here to give an update today on the work that we've been doing. We're doing recently, as well as currently doing, regarding digital credentials, in particular what the Canadian Digital Service is doing on behalf of the Government of Canada. So just a quick intro of the Canadian Digital Service. So we were created in 2017. We have a broader mandate where we're looking at end-to-end service journeys for people and businesses. So we have kind of a government-wide perspective. And so that a lot of these initiatives I'm going to be talking about are focused on kind of that end-to-end service journey and enabling Government of Canada partners across Government of Canada. So just at a high level, just kind of want to identify what we mean by digital credentials. So what we're actually meaning is all the sorts of digital credentials in people's lives. So this could be driver's licenses, university degrees, travel documents, pretty much anything that an authoritative source, whether that be government or trusted private sector entity, what they issue as a physical document is something that can be provided as a digital credential. So this is for the while, for most of the while I'll be talking about it is where these are provided to the end user, so a person or entity who can then share this, say, through a digital wallet. From the perspective of the Government of Canada, this is completely voluntary. So this is not something that will replace a lot of the traditional ways of obtaining services. People can continue to obtain services in person, over the phone, and such. It is another option for them to do this digitally. And just kind of from a more technical standpoint, we're using digital credentials. This refers to it's technology agnostic or technology framework agnostic. So this could include W3C verifiable credentials, ISO, MDoc, MDL. It could include SDJOTs and such. So this is we're treating it as a broader set of technologies and protocols, focusing more on the digital versions of documents. So with regards to the Canadian Digital Service, what we're particularly focused on is easy, secure, trusted access to services. So yes, there's online services, but there's also in-person services. We have many different services that can benefit from digital, whether that's an online portal or it could be accessing something at an in-person service center, or even say at a regulatory touch point, such as a boarding gate. What we're working towards is kind of a unified by a common approach across the Government of Canada to digital credentials, and so that's where the Canadian Digital Services is coming in to help. So I will speak to two different approaches or two platforms that are being stood up to enable this. So this is a part of the Enterprise Digital Credentials Program portfolio, for which I'm part of. So one is focused on sign-in and access services. So this is a common sign-in method for accessing multiple government services. The other one is more focused on digital credential infrastructure. So that's focused on to be able to issue and verify digital credentials. So I'll briefly cover the first one, which is called Government of Canada Sign-In. So the focus of that is on providing a single way to sign into all Government of Canada accounts, having a single identity profile, essentially reducing a lot of the complexity, making it much easier for Canadians to obtain Government of Canada services, to making it more cost effective, but also much easier and safer for users to do that. The reason for this is because the current service model, there are many different approaches. A fragmented approach with many different sign-in approaches, many different experiences, many different systems spread across many different departments. And a lot of this can lead to repeated tasks and effort, as well as it could lead to extra time to be able to access services without out-of-bound methods being used as well. So a lot of this is trying to bring this into a common Government of Canada approach. This is at a high level. Just kind of the architecture. Pretty much it's invisible to the end user, but then there's kind of two different parts. There's a single front door, which is what the end user typically interacts with, as well as the access layer. This is intended to be a flexible model to support the various different needs of departments, while trying to keep this invisible. So keeping it as behind the wall plumbing for the end user, making it work, making it a common, consistent experience without having to deal with the underlying complexities. And so just as a quick update on that, that solution has been procured, pilot partners have been identified, and they're working to establish the team and everything to stand up the solution. So this is something that's in the works, but that is something that Canadian Digital Services focused on. Now, on the second part, speaking to digital credentials infrastructure, and that's actually my area. So this is focused on providing a common set of capabilities to Government of Canada departments to be able to issue these digital credentials and to be able to request and verify digital credentials that are issued by others. It could be, say, from like other jurisdictions within Canada, or even from the EU, from the private sector. It would give us the ability to put out digital versions of our documents and be able to consume and verify those provided elsewhere. And the goal is to make this much easier for Government of Canada departments to get in this space, ensure a common user experience across Government of Canada services. And a key part of this as well is working towards interoperability and mutual recognition of Government of Canada digital credentials. So not only could our digital credentials be used beyond the Government of Canada, say for instance in the EU, but also for us then be able to accept, recognize and consume those from elsewhere as well. And just to emphasize again, this is purely optional. People would continue to have the ability to obtain services through traditional methods such as by phone or in person. The reason why we're doing this is because this can enable faster and more convenient service. So this is something that could reduce repetitive tasks and things that could take, like in some cases, weeks, could reduce it to mere seconds and such. So there's an opportunity to greatly improve the service experience, reducing a lot of time-consuming steps. It's also an opportunity to increase privacy protection and security, giving end users more control over their information and who they share it with. From a service provider standpoint, it's gives us greater certainty. It makes it much easier for us to detect fraud and to verify that the things are authentic and from the right people. And also, this also helps reduce a lot of manual effort and such as having to deal with input errors, reducing the need for manual verification, helping us to automate and streamline services, and even then, reducing things such as printing and such, and even be able to control whether something is a credential is still valid can greatly reduce a lot of administration effort. So right now we're pilot testing these type of capabilities. So this is a high level architecture of what's being offered, where the Government of Canada services are able to access the issuing and verifying service and a trust registry. And these are able to work with external users with Government of Canada recognized digital wallets, which could include an optional Government of Canada wallet app. And then external verifiers are able to use the trust registry, where there's also a Government of Canada verifier app for in-person verification. That's optional as well. They can use other appropriate solutions, but this is at a high level, what we're currently pilot testing. And these are the two use cases that we will in the future be pilot testing. So the first one is where an immigration regulator is issuing a digital visa to a visa required traveler. So for us, a foreign national, then that foreign national would then present that digital visa to a boarding gate agent to facilitate the decision of whether or not they should be allowed to board a plane to Canada. So this is intended to make this much easier process and cut down on effort, as well as increase reliability of the verification. The second one is an aviation regulator, which in this case would be Transport Canada, would issue an electronic personnel license, which in the future will be called a digital personnel license, to an aviation professional, such as a pilot or an air traffic controller, who can then present that to an aviation inspector to demonstrate that they meet the requirements for the task that they're undertaking. So these are two of the pilots that are going to be taking place in the future. So there's a lot of work underway. So we do have the interstate platform. It's set up. We've onboarded one of the pilot participants with Transport Canada. We've, on the standardization side, we've also completed pilot testing of a prototype consumer foreign assessment program, and we've evaluate all the results from a recent request for information on a target state solution. We're working to get the other pilot partner on. We're working to prepare for the our 2 pilot partners for the upcoming pilot testing, getting the remaining things such as the GC Wallet app and Verifier app ready for them, and getting everything ready to move forward with the pilot testing. We're also working on the next steps of the target state procurement, which would be used to replace the current interstate solution we're using. And looking forward, I think that's where there's the opportunity for us to have those discussions on how we can align on interoperability of digital credentials, including we're working on a full-scale conformity assessment program that would enable not only to help us with this target state procurement we're doing, it is also could provide a solid basis for mutual recognition. This is just at a high level what was asked about in the request for information. These are the type of components, many of which you saw in that architecture that I showed earlier. That is the focus of what pieces that we're looking to procure. And just at a high level, our vision regarding this is more on the standardization interoperability side. So a digital wallet can be used to store and present credentials across jurisdictions and industries. So not only domestically to Canada, it could be internationally across the economy. We recognize that, and we also want to support user choice. So as part of that, we're willing to accept for the use with Government of Canada services and at regulated checkpoints, digital wallets and digital trust services that can be Government of Canada recognized. So giving people the option to use what they think is appropriate as long as it meets Government of Canada requirements. So the goal here is we want to avoid people having to juggle multiple digital wallets, multiple verifier apps and everything to obtain and provide services across the economy. We don't want to say, for instance, someone to be at a boarding gate and then they have to juggle through 5 different wallets to hand a digital passport, a digital visa, and any other of the documents. Same thing with the bank. The goal here is to avoid downloading all this complexity and confusion to the end user and enabling them to engage in these with the wallet of their choice rather than juggling multiple. And as part of that work, we're doing this with the Standards Council of Canada, is to establish that conformity assessment program that would facilitate the recognition of digital wallets and other digital trust services. And then we're hoping that this provides a solid basis for mutual recognition with other jurisdictions, including with the EU, where then we could ideally be able to recognize each other's certifications, accreditations, and approaches, working towards alignment, so we can eventually have mutual recognition and the ability for our credentials and digital trust services to be able to work in each other's jurisdictions. So at a high level, we're continuing to work on both these platforms. We're committed to working in the open and doing this. We will be working with our partner departments to test the features for both GC Sign and GC Issue and Verify, and we're taking an incremental approach to developing and evolving these platforms to ensure they meet the needs of end users as well as the service providers. And yeah, thank you. That's my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you for sharing these insights. And that was the presentation of the approach of the Government of Canada. And now we're going to switch to the European approach. The next session, we're going to hear an introduction to the European Digital Identity Wallet and existing digital signature and e-identity initiatives. The speakers will be Paolo De Rosa and Vicente Andreu Navarro, policy officers of the European Commission. The floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will start the presentation, the first part of the presentation, and then my colleague Paolo will continue with the standardization strategy. Let me first share my screen.
Yes, let me give you the power. Yes, please.
Okay. You should be able to see it now, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is to give you a short overview of what is the EU Digital Identity Framework. The EU Digital Identity Framework consists of two basic parts: the EU Digital Identity part, based on the use of the EU Digital Identity Wallet, and the trust services part that are built around the electronic signatures and other trust services. Then I will speak shortly about the possibilities on international cooperation on this framework, and we will give a bit more of detail on the standardization strategy that I think is something that is of common interest to all of us. So the EU Digital Identity Wallet is a project that started in 2021 when it was decided to amend the existing eIDAS regulation and make it more usable for citizens and give it a more secure and privacy protecting aspect. So we decided to build the EU Digital Identity Wallet. The regulation was adopted in May 2024. Is currently in force, but basic requirements, well, the basic specifications and technical requirements of the EU Digital Identity Wallet have been also adopted by means of implementing act in December 2024. So member states are currently have all what they need in order to build their national identity wallets. The main characteristic of the digital identity wallet is that it will be provided by member states. EU citizens can use it for free on a voluntary basis. They are not obliged to do it. It's voluntary for them, but it's mandatory for member states to issue wallets to their citizens. It will be accepted throughout the Union, recognized by private and public service providers. And as happens with the initiatives that Paul has just mentioned in Canada, we have paid a lot of attention to security and to privacy. We want overall things to protect the personal data of our citizens. The wallets will enable basically three main functionalities. First, to identify and authenticate both on online services and what we call proximity use cases. For instance, showing a driving license to a police officer will allow the storage and sharing of data. This data have the format under our regulation of electronic attestation of attributes, a set of information related to a person, legal or natural, and also will have the functionality of signing electronically. So citizens, when they request their wallet, they will have these three functionalities: identification, storing and sharing of data, and performance of electronic signatures of the highest quality, qualified electronic signatures under the EU regulation. What are the benefits of this new framework? Well, we foresee, of course, benefits for citizens. We will try to protect their data and simplify paperwork, simplify the access to administrative procedures, allow them to access with full guarantees that they are who they claim to be, private and public services, not only at national level, but in a cross-border environment. There are also advantages for governments that will improve access to their digital services. Paul has also mentioned that one of the objectives of this digital credential is prevention of fraud. That is also something that we have paid a lot of attention to improve security and avoid fraud in the use of the digital identities. The relying parties is how we call the online services that interact with the wallets. The wallet will improve also security and privacy in relationship between citizens and relying parties, online services. They will have a reduced cost for identification of the user. Things that they need to implement now by themselves will be granted by the use of the EU Digital Identity Wallet. And also in general, with regards to the society, we foresee an increase in the online transaction that may create new business opportunities and contribute to the economic growth. Apart from that, there will not be a single EU digital identity wallet. There will be an ecosystem of digital identity wallets, but built to one unique set of specifications. This unique set of specifications will be reused by public sector bodies or by private agents in order to build their wallets, and member states, national authorities will decide which one of these wallets are fit for the purpose of issuing electronic identification means to citizens. So there will be many different wallets in the EU, maybe even more than one per member state, but all of them built to one set of specification. And one important thing is that these wallets will need to be certified to be considered an EU digital identity wallet. We are building still those specifications for the certification, but it's something that will need to happen if a member state wants to issue credentials to a digital identity wallet. This digital identity wallet will need to be certified. I must say also that both the technical specification, what we call the architecture and reference framework of the digital identity wallet, and a reference implementation, a prototype of the wallet, are published open source in GitHub, so anyone can access the code and assess the specifications or test the reference implementation. In parallel with the technical and regulatory developments, we are testing the wallets in a wide variety of use cases. These use cases are currently being tested in 4 large-scale pilots that include all the use cases that you can see in the slide: access to government services, use of mobile driving licenses based on the wallet, use of educational credentials, use of health related documents like prescriptions or social security cards, travel credentials, organizational ID, badges from organization or from public sector bodies, registration of mobile telephony cards, opening of bank accounts, signature contracts, and electronic payments, or age verification. That is another one that we consider very, very relevant for online interaction with certain services. So this is these are basically the use cases that we are considering. The framework timeline, as I've mentioned before, the regulation was adopted in 2024, May 2024. All the implementing acts derived from the main act will be adopted in the first half of 2025. And since December 2024, member states have all what they need in order to implement their EU digital identity wallets, and they should put them at the disposal of citizens by, I think it's the 26th of December 2026. On what regards trust services, the new framework, on top of the previously existing trust services, electronic signatures, seals, timestamps, certificates for website authentication, has added a new set of trust services like electronic archiving, electronic attestation of attributes, electronic ledgers, management of remote qualified or seal creation devices. So the ecosystem of trust services has been completed in the regulation. I'm going to jump now to international cooperation. In international cooperation, we have this dual approach also. We have on one side identities with the wallet, on the other side we have trust services. I must say that the wallet as it is designed today, it's limited for its use outside of the EU. Relying parties must be registered in a member state, but we are happy to explore technical interoperability with third countries and exchange information on digital identities. On the other side, for trust services, there are provisions in the regulation for mutual recognition. So when we are talking of digital credential, or when we are talking of electronic attestation of attributes, there would be the possibility of mutual recognition. We have started to work already on mutual recognition of one very relevant trust service, the mutual recognition of electronic signatures and seals. And we have adopted a two-step approach. In the EU, under this regulation, there are two kinds of electronic signatures: the qualified electronic signatures that are equivalent to handwritten signature, and advanced that are also that cannot be denied legal effect. So what we propose is to start working on mutual recognition of services by electronic signatures and do it in this two-level approach. First as advanced, and later on as qualified, because cooperation on advanced electronic signatures is something that can be done only at the technical level and has not a great complexity. And after this, I will give the floor to Paolo, who will explain the standardization strategy for the wallet. Please, Paolo, go ahead.
Thanks.
And let me know when I need to change the slide.
Thanks, Vincent, and thanks to everybody to be here. Good afternoon. So what I would like to maybe explain a little bit more is how we are organizing the definition of the high-level requirements and the relative standardization of the requirements of the wallet. If you can go to the next slide, Vincent. Okay. So first of all, as Vincent already explained in the previous session, the architectural reference framework is a document that is collecting all the different requirements that need to be implemented in the framework of the UDI wallet. Because the UDI wallet is a legal framework, but there's also a technical framework. So essentially, there might be different implementation of the wallet, but all of them, they have to follow the same requirements, the same specification. But how we do agree on that. Sorry, 1 second to the previous slide. Yes, I would do agree. So we do agree by drafting a list of requirements in a collaborative way. I think this is a very important process we established together with member state, but also with external stakeholder, because what we are doing, we are working in an iterative way, agile way, I would say, but we are publishing a list of requirements, one topic by topic on GitHub, to collect feedback not only from a member state with an internal process, but also from external stakeholder. And everything is public. So, and if these requirements are then input for the technical specification, because it's where we understand what we need in terms of architecture and security, privacy, and everything. And this is done two meetings per topic every week and so on. And then we expect to have a major release in April that will define the set of the essential requirement to implement the wallet. There is already a published version. The latest version is 1.5 and is available on GitHub to be commented and checked. Yeah, if you move to the next slide, thanks, Vincent. And then how these requirements are used. I think it's important to understand that then to make this works internally in the EU, but also then externally for a global interoperability, we need to define technical specification and standard agreed at the international level, at EU level, and so on and so forth. Now, there are a lot of already technical specification and standards available in the market. So the first thing we did is to mapping all of them, right? To map them against what we have in the regulation and what we have defined into the architectural reference framework, by identifying exactly which specific standard specification can be useful to implement one piece of the regulation and so on. And after we did that, what we did also is then assessing, because one thing is mapping, there might be also multiple standards doing the same thing, assessing if the specific standard or specification is really fitting for the legal requirements, but also for the technical requirements. So which one is the best, or if that is entirely fitting into that, and also with a more formal approach that needs to be evaluated by the SDO. After that, what we did is a comprehensive gap analysis. So trying to find out which requirements are not fulfilled or partially fulfilled, identifying which are the new specifications that needs to be developed, which are the specifications that are already under development, and which one needs an update because maybe they are quite good, but maybe it's something is completely different. So this gap analysis is our starting point, right? And after that, what we did is engaging with the standardization organization one by one. This process is still ongoing to validate this gap analysis, to validate all the analysis we did to make sure that we are understanding correctly the standard, understanding the scope, and what this is the evolution of that standard. So, and we are having this discussion every day with the SDO. I think this is a very important point. After that, we will provide feedback for the standardization, as I said, directly through the ERF with the list of high-level requirements, but then also direct feedback to the SDO if there is a specific standard or specification we want to monitor, but also to monitor not just the content, but mainly the content, but also the timeline. Because in all of this, we do have a very challenging timeline that Vicente was showing before. So meaning that by the end of 2026, member state needs to know how to build. They need to have this standard and specification ready. That's for this reason, we will have a kind of strategy that maybe at the beginning, we will rely on specification that with the time will become standard in the different and following the different processes that SDO they have. And to support all this, what we did is together with our colleagues of the other unit that was presented before, so and also from GROW, is to publish action grants. So basically supporting the standardization activity, and this will be awarded after after August 25. So if you go to the next slide. I think these two slides are showing our progress. I will not stop much here just to show you that we are working with ETSI, with CEN, with ISO, ITF, CSE, or OpenID Foundation, W3C, and there are others that are maybe just one that we group together. But it's really an important work we are trying to do here. So, and we did a gap analysis and a complete roadmap. And also submitted the action grant, as was said. So the next slide, Vicente, maybe I will. Yeah, so the assessment is still in progress because, as you can understand, this is quite complex. We do have a lot of work to do here, but we are around the 70% of the effort done. The final assessment will be, in the roadmap will be by the end, maybe Q2, then Q1 25. So next slide, and I think the last one. So what are the next steps? As we will continue to engage with all the SDO until up to now, it's been very constructive and active dialogue we have with them, and there is obviously a mutual interest to standardize all the wallet functions. Next steps are, in the coming weeks, we are going to publish the dashboard that will provide a comprehensive mapping of all the technical specifications that we are looking at, and along with the expected timeline for each one, and in which status they are. So I think this will be a major milestone because everybody will be aware of what we are looking and why, and this will be public on GitHub together with ERF. And and for all the new and updated technical specification, Commission will follow directly the advancement together with the SDO, with the ambition to reference them into the regulation as soon as these standards are ready to be referenced after we went through the assessment, the proper assessment process. This was the last slide. I don't know, Vicente, if you want to conclude or.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Paolo. I think we are taking a bit more of time when we were allocated, but I think it was good to explain all this. And if you want to have more information on this through this QR code, you will be able to find it. So that's all from our side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicente. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you for this clear presentation. So we have heard the approach from the government of Canada. We have heard the approach from the European side. And now in the next session, we're going to hear about the results of the cooperation between Europe and Canada on interoperability of digital credentials. The speakers will be Stergios Theophoulis, Program and Policy Officer from the European Commission, Ben Piercy, CTO, co-founder of Affinity Quest, and Dominic Beron, co-founder and CEO of Vault ID. The floor to you, Stergios, and I'm going to share the slides from my side.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much also for sharing the slides. So this session will be a little bit different, of a different nature than the previous one. The previous sessions were focused on the policy developments of the policy frameworks on digital credentials in EU and Canada, while this session will focus on the research and innovation collaboration activities that we had in the context of the NGI initiative. So from the side of the NGI initiative, from the side of the EU, Europe, the NGI initiative implemented an action, a research innovation action for cooperation with Canada. So this cooperation, first of all, I will give you a little bit of a background, what is the next generation internet, and then I will give you a description on the project that we launched. And finally, I will give the floor to the researchers that they implemented a use case for interoperability of digital credentials between EU and Canada. So to start with, Next Generation Internet is an initiative with a focus on creating a human-centric internet, reimagining the internet as an internet of human-centric internet, and also to develop these key components, the technological components that are aligned also with the EU digital rights and values. We are focusing on technological areas like digital credentials, online trust, privacy-enhancing technologies, and decentralized internet architectures. And we provide funds to equity-free funds to researchers and developers with low administration procedures and for short research and innovation cycles projects. We manage in NGI started in 2018, and we have already funded 1,500 solutions, and we managed to create a very vibrant ecosystem of open source innovators and contributors. And this community of these innovators is mainly from SMEs, startups, and also there are also individual researchers and developers on this community. So NGI, how it works? It works, we have research and innovation actions, and we have also the pilots, the innovation actions. The pilots are making use of the existing solution from NGI that they have built, we have built during all these years, to develop new solutions and implement them applying them in real use case, real life use cases. While the research and innovation actions is a different one, it's actions where we select intermediaries, and 80% of the budget goes to support third parties with open calls. So the intermediaries handle the open calls, and this is a bottom-up approach, and we give the opportunity to the innovators to bring their ideas and then to build something concrete, to build a solution and to develop their idea into a project. And 20% goes in order to select, monitor, mentor also, and train the researchers that they're participating in this project. So we have also, of course, we cannot ignore that the internet is global and decentralized, so NGI is also active and active in international cooperation, and we are very active in international cooperation with like-minded countries because this is also important towards a human-centric internet. And of course, Canada is in the priorities of NGI, and so Following the workshops that Vicente and Paul also mentioned that we had in 2021 between Canada and Europe on enabling interoperability of digital credentials between the two jurisdictions, we launched an initiative, we launched a project, the NGI Sargasso project, which is a research and innovation action, in order to work with Canada and or US. So on research areas and topics related to next generation internet. The project, maybe we can go also to the next slide, Luigi, where we have, thank you very much. So the project opened 5 open calls, and in total, Sargasso have funded 53 projects, from which 20 is with teams from Canada, and 7 of them is on digital credentials and trust services interoperability with between EU and Canada on digital credentials and trust services. But on top of this project, we launched, and NGI Sargasso launched in December 23, a dedicated track to work on interoperability of digital credentials between the two jurisdictions, and to work on the travel continuum concept. So with this dedicated track, there were 3 teams were established to work together from Canada and EU. The first team was working on, was focused more on the academia sector. So how a student can reuse their digital credentials in Canada and the EU and vice versa. The second one was, the focus of the second one was on cloud agents and digital credentials, with a priority, the accessibility and the inclusion of people that do not use very often digital technologies. And the third one is worked together on a hypothetical scenario of EU and Canada citizen, where he travels from EU and Canada and vice versa, and stores and verifies digital credentials in a wallet, in a digital wallet. So I think this project finished on summer 2024. So there are a lot of developments also in that area. So from the summer until now. But today we have with us the representatives of the third team. I will give now the floor to Dominic from Volt ID, which is from Europe, and also to Ben from Affinity Quest from Canada, and they will present to us their cooperation, to speak, of course, for their cooperation experience, what problems they faced, and also to present their developments and the evolution of that project. So that was all for me. It's a very short introduction just to give the framework of the NGI initiative and what are these projects that Dominic will present afterwards. So thank you very much, Lizzie.
Okay, thank you. So Steph just mentioned, now passing the floor to Ben and Dominic. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Ben Piercy from Affinity Quest. I have some slides to present to you as well, so if you can just
yeah, please, thank
sure
you.
that I can do that. Okay. Okay. Hopefully that's coming through okay. So what I wanted to do first is just a very quick introduction to Affinity Quest as a company. You probably haven't heard of us, but I just want to sort of set some stage here. We're a Canadian software company based in Ottawa, Canada. Our founders have a very long history of innovation and business success in the identity and cybersecurity space. in a time range ranging back to the 80s, in fact, through 3 different companies, both services and product. Most recently with Affinity Quest, we've been working very closely with the Canadian federal government on some of their initiatives, and helping to transform and accelerate some of those transformation projects using digital credentials within the federal government. So 2 of our most current projects related to that are around personnel licenses for aviation people, so licensing authorities for civil aviation and the licenses that are issued and verified to those professionals, and also temporary digital resident visas. I think it's focused around students as well. So these are 2 of the projects that we kind of have in flight with the Canadian federal government. And also with our involvement with the Canadian federal government, we were introduced to the NGI Sargasso project and to our friends at WaltID out of Austria. So I'll spend the rest of my time kind of speaking to this use case and this scenario and some of the things that we observed with this, and then I'll pass the floor to Dominic to provide his perspectives on this. When we were approached to do this, we were asked to sort of focus on the travel continuum, and so there are I'm sure lots of different use cases around some of these foundational documents that Paul Jackson had talked about around visas and passports and so on. But we wanted to sort of take it in a direction that was more focused on the traveler itself in terms of their journey and their actual vacation, and how interactions with both government and private sector could be facilitated using digital credentials. And so the first use case here is around allowing for these online issuances of credentials that might be used for reservations or for tour passes that you might get at an online travel site. So we mocked up an online travel site where you can fill in what it is you were looking to purchase for your vacation, and you could scan those into your digital wallet. And in this case, the digital wallet that we were using was the one that was built and run by WaltID, actually an online wallet. So the Affinity Quest portion of that was to build that online travel site and to facilitate the issuance of those reservations and tour passes into the WaltID wallet. And then, of course, on the WaltID side, building the verification capabilities around that use case at a hotel, where you could present at the hotel your reservation, and it would unlock a locker for your key, for instance, for your room. And then following on from that, the ability to prove that you have your tour pass, so you're going to do your Alps tour, so that the operator of that tour could actually verify that you've registered, and then that you've got access to that. So that was kind of the first pass through for that scenario. And all that worked reasonably well. The other piece of this was, on the return trip, now the Canadian travel coming back home, part of the journey in any vacation, of course, is picking up souvenirs and some shopping and interacting with businesses in wherever your destination is. And so we thought, well, okay, well, what happens? So one of the things here in Canada is this notion of being able to get a rebate on your VAT taxes that you pay internationally. So we said, okay, well, let's say the traveler, is doing their Alps tour, and they want to buy, some gear for their tour. Like I think there was walking sticks or something that we had them purchase. And so as part of that purchase process, the retailer would issue a verifiable tax receipt into the WaltID wallet that the traveler could then carry with them. And at any time when they got home, or in the hotel that evening, could actually redeem that or have that refund applied for the VAT taxes by presenting that verifiable tax receipt to a Canadian tax authority. Now, I should mention that all of these were kind of mocked up organizations. We didn't actually integrate with CRA here in Canada, but it was kind of it was just to show what that flow could be. And I think the great thing about this is that it takes it into the real world scenarios of what a traveler might experience, and the removal of some of the administrative burden associated with reclaiming these tax receipts, particularly for Canadians. It was it's a good departure from the traditional kind of border crossing official document kind of scenarios that we typically see. Of course, those would be in and around any such scenario like this, but we wanted to sort of take it into that kind of more commercial realm with a touchback into government around the tax receipts and the refunds, etc. So so with that, I will hand it off to actually I have one more slide here. There was a couple of different things that we had whoops, sorry. There was a video produced as a part of this, and I've got the link here, and I'm not going to play it for you now because we'll run out of time. But it's a great video that the team at WaltID had put together that sort of highlights this whole flow, all the different assets that were produced, and the screens for the travel site and the tour operator and all that stuff are all there. So I invite you to go have a look at that. It's a very well done little video. And some of the things that we've noticed along the way, as I mentioned, what challenges we had faced along the way here in doing this. And I think, some of the things that come to mind was it was never sat well with me that, there had to be this forward negotiation of, okay, what are we going to use from an interop profile perspective? From on the technical side, it always felt to me that there should be some mechanism of discovering that dynamically. And so that was kind of one thing that stuck out with me, is that there needs to be something in the way that we do this for interoperability, to be able to discover what those interoperability requirements are, and so going to negotiate those things dynamically. I felt that in terms of the specifications and the protocols that we're using now, they were then, and they still are a little bit of a moving target. Things are starting to converge now, so there was some back and forth in making sure we're on the right draft of that specification and the right draft of this specification. So that was kind of another thing that we noticed. And also, I felt that for the retailer case, the natural integration of that would be like a tap kind of interaction, like a proximity based thing. And for that particular credential format that we're using, it wouldn't support that type of operation. So I feel like generally there's kind of a bit of a gap in support for multiple different formats across in these point-to-point proximity based interactions. So these are some of the observations and learnings that I took away from that. And but overall, I thought this project was a lot of fun to work on. It was great working with the folks at WaltID, and I thought the collaboration went really well. And with that, I will actually turn it over to Dominic now and let him provide or share his experiences as well.
Sure, thanks, Ben. To be honest, I think all the important things have already been said, and thanks, Ben, for preparing the slides. I mean, from our end, I just want to underline a few things. Number one, I think, Ben's message of standards does not equal interoperability is a very important and big message. We're learning this all the time when we're working in projects like this, or in the EU large-scale pilots, where we're also demonstrating interoperability with other vendors, or when we're working in projects maybe outside of Europe with large US companies that have similar product offerings. It's just really difficult. Standards are moving targets. There's different versions. There's different flows and subflows, especially on the level of exchange protocols. And at the end of the day, customers or organizations that put something into production want everything, all the, let's say, different standards, flows with all the advantages and disadvantages that they're coming from. That being said, I think exercises like these are super important because they enable organizations like us, like Affinity Quest and WaltID, to experiment, to invest some time into R&D, and potentially also feed that back into the standardization process as early implementers. Yeah, as Ben said, it was really fun to work on this. I also think that the use cases were very interesting. Apart from this, we're also working with governments around the globe, especially in this context of travel use cases, simply because if I'm arriving in a new country or a new destination, I typically don't know much about this new, place and how stuff works there. And so we see a couple of governments outside of Europe, especially in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, experimenting now with applications for travelers and having this as the, let's say, point of entry for equipping people with digital identity wallets. And so yeah, we hope that this project and the learnings that we have are useful for as many people as possible. Feel free to check out the link that we created together with our friends at Affinity Quest. And if there's any questions, obviously happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. There is also a dedicated Q&A section right after. Okay, thank you very much. That was really a fantastic overview. And coming up, we have roundtable on the advances and best practices in standardization for digital identity, digital credentials, and trusted services. And now I'll leave the floor to the moderator of this session, Tania Suarez from Blue Specs and coordinator of the Instar project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luigi, and thank you all of you for bearing with us afternoon in Europe and morning in Canada. So first of all, just a very quick comment there to Ben. I really like the photograph of the chap there that seemed to be over the moon that he'd got his VAT refund on all the purchases that he'd been making. So clearly the tourism and travel use case is going to be one of the ones driving this forward. So we have a really exciting roundtable here. It's, as Luigi said, it's on advantages and best practices standardization for digital identity, credentials, and trust services. And what we're going to be doing is explaining, exploring, and identifying actions also that can be taken to deliver on the promise of the Canada-European Union Digital Partnership. So I know that this has been mentioned a couple of times already, but I think it's useful to once again centre some of the key elements that have been already agreed in that partnership. So first of all, develop joint use cases and pilot projects towards interoperability of digital identity and digital credentials and trust services, building notably on the EU and Canada's respective frameworks. And Vicente already shared some use cases here. Secondly, to create shared knowledge repositories for digital identity and credentials. And Vicente also mentioned some specifications that are already available on GitHub for anyone wanting to explore that in further detail. Thirdly, collaboration on the development of human-centric digital identity and digital credentials. And this is something that was mentioned earlier, and I think it was Paul, very much taking the needs of the end user into account. If they want to use these services, that's fantastic, but perhaps, they're unable to for whatever reason, and that should also be considered and provided for by the government. And the last one, build adoption, awareness, and support through concrete demonstrations. And hopefully today's event will be, I wouldn't say the start, but the continuation perhaps on some of the collaborations, but the start of some new efforts in that sphere. And at this point, I'd like to welcome the panelists to the session. So we have Marcus Abadello, founder of Danube Tech, and he's also a member of the Instar Cybersecurity and EID Task Force. Welcome, Marcus. Scott Gadsrew, ETC AI Chair, and also a member of the Instar Cybersecurity and EID Task Force. Welcome, Scott. Sebastian Elfors, then TC224 Working Group 20 European Digital Identity Wallet. And last but not least, Tim Bomer, Special Advisor from the Digital Governance Council of Canada. So we're going to be exploring three themes: digital identity wallets and decentralized identity, the cross-border interoperability aspect, and mutual recognition, again, something that's come up in some of the previous sessions. And finally, aligning approaches. How do we align approaches? Where can we, and where is it going to be more difficult for us to be able to agree on certain processes? So let me start by asking Sebastian. You're directly involved in developing standards for digital identity under EIDAS 2.0. Can you tell us a little bit about the progress that's been made on defining secure interfaces between wallets and how you expect this to influence any or to be aligned with what Panis is doing also in the field?
Right, yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Tanya. Yes, so first and foremost, we have, of course, the EIDA wallet ARF, that was presented by Paolo De Rosa in a great way just before. And the EUDI Wallet IRF is the framework really that specifies the interfaces and roles in the ecosystem for the EUDI Wallet, the PID providers, the QTSPs, and the relying parties. And as regards to issuance, it's the SEN TS 18098 about PID onboarding to the EUDI Wallet. That is truly about issuing or bootstrapping the EUDI wallet with person identification data. And that is being developed by the SEN Working Group 20, which I'm taking part of. As regards to issuance of qualified attributes, qualified electronic attribute attestations, ETSI is working on a new standard for that matter. It's called 119471. And it's targeting qualified trust service providers who wish to issue attributes to wallets. And the attributes, they complement the PIDs, if you will, with attributes such as the ISO mobile driving license. And then we have the relying parties, which are the counterparties to the user, if you will. And that is truly about the EUDI wallet and the user presenting the PID and also the qualified attributes to relying parties. And also here, SEN Working Group 20 is working on a new standard for access control of qualified attributes in order to determine a workflow, what the user should present and what the relying parties are allowed to request. And also ETSI are working on two standards in parallel to this, called ETSI 119462. It's about EUDI wallet interfaces, and ETSI TS 119475 about relying party access to the EUDI wallet. And to get back to your question about the Canadian alignment, first and foremost, I think it's the EUDI wallet ARF, which is the cornerstone, the framework that could get expired with, and then dive deeper into the different SEN ETSI related standards.
Thank you, Sebastian. That's a very thorough answer and already identifying some action that can be taken following this panel and this session. So Scott, now over to you. ETSI standards are often the basis for eIDAS conformance. They're going to be introducing some new requirements. What new or updated specifications are in that pipeline that Canadian stakeholders should be aware of?
Well, fortunately, Sebastian's covered most of that already, which is quite good. Basically, the simple thing to note is that standards are reviewed whenever there's a change in the context, and IDAS 2 is a big change in the context. The success of IDAS in the initial phase meant IDAS 2 had to come along because suddenly you saw new opportunities for it, and those new opportunities require changes. So we're looking at how to extend the set of trusted authorities or trusted parties. So we can do things like digital wallet. We can do, as Sebastian's pointed out, things like age assurance, selective disclosure. All those things are then tied into a single device that is or entity, the digital wallet, and that gives us massive capability to move it forward. So I don't want to list a huge number of standards, but essentially, whenever there's a change, ETSI, as all SDOs, as all responsible developers will have to look at their products and see, is this sufficient today? Is it sufficient tomorrow? If it's not sufficient for tomorrow, we will make changes, and we'll do that in collaboration with other SDOs, so not just ETSI, but SEN, SENELEC, ISO, and others, and with our partner governments as well, to make sure we're providing the right standards for both our industries and our governments. So that answers it.
Thanks, Scott. So flexibility essentially is the key there. As the frameworks change, there needs to be an element of you take something out, but you might want to add something in as the context changes and evolves. And presumably, if we pick up on the of the benefit of preventing fraud, that's an environment that is continuously updating. So that's
and one of the things we very much have to be aware of is that just because we've got a good standard for today, the attackers against that, the use cases that we develop standards for are not going to be the only ones that people actually adopt. and we'll find that they've used our technologies, our capabilities in ways we never expected, in which case we have to come back and change it. So we have to be very, very careful and very observant of the market to make sure that we are not letting the market down and we're not disabling future markets. So that's where just market observation is a mighty important part of standards development, because without that, we don't have effective standards.
I think, Marcus, you'd agree with that. Keep standards close to industry. I mean, you know, your background at Danube Tech spans decentralized ID as well, DIDs, verified credentials. So how do you see these decentralized solutions fitting in with the EIDAS 2.0 and the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework?
It's an interesting question. Of course, we've been talking about decentralized identity for many years, right? And there have been a lot of great initiatives and projects like NGI and standards groups and conferences and so on about decentralized identity. Of course, different people usually associate different things or have slightly different understanding of what decentralization means, right? At some point, there has also been and still is the concept that we call self-sovereign identity, right? As an counter proposal to things like login with Facebook, login with Google, right? The idea that I have a digital identity that only I control and that's independent of central authorities and intermediaries, and this kind of thing. This thinking has, I think, led to the emergence of technical building blocks like decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials and digital wallets. And an interesting question is to what extent the initiatives that we see today in the EU, EIDAS, and in Canada, the trust framework, to in what ways is that decentralized and in what ways is it not decentralized? We heard earlier today, for example, that a UDI wallet out of the box will probably not work in Canada because of the trust model and maybe different credential formats and the need to register relying parties and things like that. And the standards, the technical building blocks play a role there, right? Maybe we'll talk about that a bit more later, but there are a lot of different standards to choose from, right? There are different credential formats, there are different protocols, and the standards that we choose here, I think, will also have an impact then on how decentralized the solutions will be and how interoperable they will be.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. One of the things that I didn't say when I was introducing you all is I think that we have over a century's worth of experience in dealing with the ever-shifting standardization landscape and digital trust services generally. So, and I think that here, Tim, you mentioned that you've had multiple roles throughout your career in relation to this. You've worked with Canadian provinces, you're now, obviously at federal government level. And I think there are lots of parallels there with Europe. We have a very, very diverse community, different cultures, very definitely, different approaches to privacy, different approaches to how we consume, and the importance we attach to having a digital identity. So from your own experience, do you think it's best to approach harmonization? You already have this, going from Canadian provinces to federal. What are the learning points? What can you share with us? What are the kind of things that we should be looking at?
Yeah, so I guess the first point is, like, I'm not worried about the technical specifications. I view those as what I call instrumental requirements. How do you build stuff? That's pretty straightforward. And the experience that we gained, especially going back like many years, 2014, for example, working with the provinces and territories, like Canada has a very decentralized governance structure. I would always joke that the European Commission has more authority over the member states than the federal government has over the provinces and territories. Joking aside, we recognize that the province of BC is different than province of Alberta, is different from the Yukon Territory. And from when I was in my role at Treasury Board Secretariat, we had to respect that, you know, element of confederation, if you will. So we actually took our inspiration from the original EIDAS back in 2014 when we started to look at the trust, started to develop the trust framework. And we actually took a lot of those elements and actually brought it in to serve the Canadian context. So from 2014 to 2018, when we onboarded the province of Alberta, we had to recognize that they had different technologies, they had different program governance and that, and we had to come up with a an assessment regime, if you will, to actually ensure that we have that we had confidence in their programs to onboard them into the federal programs. And so that was a lot of work, and we actually developed a really intensive conformity assessment framework, which has been iterated. And in fact, we had a call, like I work very closely with the Canadian Digital Services. I'm still a federal employee. I'm just on assignment on the outside, so to speak. And we're now refining it so that it enables not only acceptance of the province and territories' digital credentials, but also reciprocity or mutual recognition that if the federal government does something, the provinces could actually avail themselves to that. So I think, you know, applying that to the European context, we totally recognize that you have the EIDAS 2.0. I'm quite familiar with it. The implementing acts, all the technical specifications. Canada has a very different regulatory and policy landscape. You know, at last count, I think I've identified 18 instruments that are in effect that are similar to what's in the provisions of the EIDAS. And so it's a question of, I talked about instrumental requirements. That's not a big deal. Now we're getting into what I call intentional requirements, which is how do we ensure that these mandates are actually followed? How do we ensure that Canada is accountable to the EU and the EU is accountable to Canada? That's a bit of the heavy lifting that we have to do forward, is actually to honor the different governance arrangements, the different social and institutional cultures, of course, aligned with common values, but how do we actually bring that together in something that's cohesive into an agreement? I'll leave it out there.
Thank you. Well, you've just left us on a tender hook there, I think, with the intentional requirements question, but I think that would be a subject for a whole other panel. So let me come back to how we can align approaches, because I think it's also something that you have paved the way for in what you've just shared. Sebastian, the OpenID standards, they underpin many identity solutions. How is your working group coordinating with OpenID and similar alliances to update specifications for new requirements? And you know, how can we make sure that they, as Tim has just said, that they work smoothly also, and they serve those intentional requirements for Canada too?
Right. So the European standardization bodies, SAN and ETSI, I would say that they have a very good cooperation with international standardization bodies like the IETF, OpenID Foundation, ISO, etc. And during plenaries within these standardization organizations, there are usually a roll call, basically, with ISO, IETF, etc., to report on the developments from their standards. So it's a great cooperation, really. And as regards to OpenID that you mentioned, OpenID for verifiable credential issuance, that would be the standard that describes credential issuance also for the EUDI wallet. So it's one of the standards that have been referenced by the implementing acts even. And for presentation protocols, it's again, OpenID for verifiable presentation that would be used for presenting qualified attributes. And more specifically, we have the ISO mobile driving license standard, ISO 18013-5 and -7, and also the new protocol coming up, ISO 22220-4. And those protocols will be used for presenting mobile driving license and in some cases also for ISO 23220-4 for SDWT. And the EU-Canadian alignment could, of course, then be based on these international standards. In particular, I think the ISO mobile driving license standard is of great importance here, because it is international. It has been rolled out, in particular in the United States. So I think that would be a great cornerstone to keep working on.
Thank you, Sebastian. And you mentioned the driving license, of course, another great use case is for anyone wanting to travel, whether for work or pleasure. I still prefer getting tax back though really easily, just to say that. Marcus, you're active, really active, in fact, in the Instar Cybersecurity and EID task force. What have you seen there that kind of maybe illustrates different approaches between different standardization bodies?
Well, we see different types of relationships. I agree with Sebastian that sometimes there is good collaboration between standards bodies, but I hope it's okay if I say some more controversial things. Maybe I believe that sometimes, unfortunately, there's also competition between the standards bodies and maybe not always fully honest communication of what a standard is doing and the motivation behind standards. I'm thinking, for example, about formats for verifiable credentials or formats for electronic attestations of attributes, right? We heard about verifiable credentials from W3C. We heard about the mobile driver's license from ISO, and we heard about the SD-JOT or SD-JOT-VC. And you can kind of do the same things with all of them. All of them are a way of modeling the content of a credential in your wallet, but they are all incompatible, right? And making them compatible, making them interoperable is not easy, I think. And the existence of these incompatible formats, in my subjective opinion, cannot really be justified on a technical level. I think there are business interests sometimes. I think there are political lobbying activities, unfortunately, which lead to divergence with some of these standards. I think it's not ideal, for example, that the ARF, which we heard about, specifies multiple different formats, right? For implementers, for use cases, for adoption, it would be better if there was one rather than two. And even within Europe, we heard about the EPSI project, European Blockchain Service Infrastructure. They use one standard for credential formats, and the EUDI wallet ARF uses other credential formats. And so even within Europe, interoperability is hard, considering some of the landscape in these standardization activities.
Thanks, Marcus. And I think that there was a comment there that I saw pop up saying that we have too many SDOs. So it's obviously what you said resonates with at least some people in the audience. So let's pick up again, come back to some of the work in some of those SDOs. And here I'd like to come back again to you, Sebastian. So SEN TC 224 Working Group 20 is examining cross-border interoperability and levels of assurance. What key lessons have emerged around mapping or bridging different LOAs to ensure a seamless user experience globally? Again, you know, we've seen a couple of, well, actually quite a few use cases and demonstrators, but what have you seen is something that we should always take into account when we're wanting to launch a demonstration that is scalable into the future?
Right. There are in particular two projects that I would like to highlight here. And the first one is a cooperation project between NIST in the US and the EU Commission, and whereby they analyzed and compared the ADAS level of assurance with the NIST SP 800-63 on the digital identities. And the report is called the EU-US TTC Digital Identity Mapping. And one important key takeaway from this is that in the EU, the EID schemes are driven by the eIDAS regulation, whereas in the US, it's more focused on policies and guidelines. And another key takeaway from the report is that there are no major concepts or that doesn't really deviate too much. So there aren't many differences really when you really compare the requirements one by one. What is notably missing in that report, I think, is the EUDA wallet under EIDAS 2, since that would be, like we said, of great interest for the ISO mobile driving license and also for the ICAO digital travel credentials, the DTC, which are both global standards that involves traveling as well. So I would look forward to an update to that report under EIDAS 2. The other project I would like to highlight is that the EIDAS interoperability project with third countries under the EIDAS Article 14, which Vicente Navarro presented just before. And there's in particular one project that is of great interest, and that is Ukraine. They have a pretty ambitious program to align their electronic signature legislation with the EIDAS. So currently, if you have a Ukrainian qualified signature, you can actually validate it in the EU. And vice versa, if you have a European qualified electronic signature, it can be validated in Ukraine. And also in Japan, there is a recent project for cross-border signature interoperability, and they are also pretty active in the Cloud Signature Consortium for remote signature creation. And last but not least, we have the United Kingdom. They left the EU due to Brexit a number of years ago, and instead they have launched a UK digital identity trust framework. And there are now initiatives to harmonize the UK schemes with the EIDAS 2 schemes. I think those are the lessons learned from these interoperability projects.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sebastian. And I think Q Scott, I mean, you know, mentioned Brexit, and that's it. So we've already gone through a process, or we're actually probably still going through it, where there has been a need to fast that mutual recognition from you know, for the benefit of industry, for the benefit of society. So what have you seen from ETSI, for example? Have there been any specific deliverables or liaison agreements that could be kind of like replicated to accelerate that mutual recognition? What things were done that were perhaps not super helpful, and what things were absolutely great? And whenever we think of mutual recognition, we should always hold that as a gold standard of things to do.
Without being hugely political about this, yeah, Brexit was kind of a disaster for some respects, because it broke some of that liaison. The individuals involved weren't really affected very much. The expertise is still available from the UK to ETSI and other European standards bodies, and that expertise is available globally as well. So if we look at it from an expertise point of view rather than from a national point of view, expertise is available wherever, and the expertise is given to the right standards. But a lot of the points I see in the chat that are on the Q&A, yeah, there are too many STOs, and we in ETSI we create roadmaps of standards a lot. We try and identify the ecosystem around standards, and quite often we find we list hundreds, if not thousands, of standards bodies competing for the same market. That's not going to change. It's a competitive market. The ESOs unfortunately have been set up to largely compete amongst themselves anyway. And part of that comes because of the change of what standards do and the way we build things. I mean, everything's ICT now. Everything has a piece of software in it. Everything has some electronics in it. So that there's and everything has to communicate with everything else, everything's connected to everything else. So the traditional ITU and ETSI deal with telecoms, and SEN deals with this better software and low power electronics, and SENLEC deals with high power electronics. That's disappeared. That world doesn't exist anymore. And some of those things become quite complicated when you're looking at things like digital standard, or things like digital wallet used in a supply chain. Supply chains are massive. They cover hardware, software, they cover international borders, they cover, you know, we'll have all this discussion about tariffs fairly soon. But the scope of what we're trying to address by technical standards and the political environment for those standards don't always meet nicely. And I think we have to be aware of that. But having said all that, I think that the ultimate aim is that most people involved in standards want to have a single global standard that has interoperability at its core. But they also have the problem that people want to be better than some other standards body. They want to do something more. And you end up with this, there are 10 effective standards, we need one to bind them all, so you end up with 11, then you end up with 12, 13, and suddenly you get to 100 standards because you're trying to bind more and more together. At times we have to be much braver. SDO's KPI, its key indicator, is how many standards they produce. So it's in their best interest to publish more and more, whereas we should be trying to cut down. That fundamentally changes the model. Industry would love us to cut down and have less, but unfortunately we're human beings. We compete all the time. We compete in everything we do. So unless you change human nature, we're going to have competition. What we have to do is make sure that competition is effective to get the best to market rather than just something to market. That's something we'll take on board and try and develop. But unfortunately, we're also in a political world. Things change every day. In the last 6 weeks or so, less than that now, we've seen massive changes in how the world is going to operate. That's going to impact our standards. It's going to cause significant rupture in what we're doing. So if IDAS becomes the model for the global trading world, and if IDAS becomes, through the digital wallet, a model for exchange of information across borders, then that's great. But we've got to accept that's going to have to exist in a political world that might not want that. And so it's difficult, but we'll plug ahead trying to get the best interoperable standards we can.
Scott, you've just zoomed us out completely. We'd gone into the kind of like the detail of EIDAS, and Sebastian has taken us through very specific standards, and you've like brought us right up to that 30,000 foot view, or what would that be, 10,000 meter view, depending on where you are. And you've mentioned so many things. So first of all, standards used to be I suppose the fiefdoms, if that's not too rude a word, of the different SDOs before were clearer. Now we have technology that are actually multi-domain, and that means that it is actually possible that SDOs are working on similar standards, maybe from different perspectives, but ultimately, standards that are very similar or overlapping. Secondly, though, I think that you also alluded to the fact that we're in a new political environment, and in fact, this might also, by inference, you didn't say this, but by inference, this might also mean that it's a really good opportunity for Europe and Canada to come together to agree things that are going to make trade easier for everyone. Trade, travel, VAT, receipt claiming, all of that. So, Tim, what are your views on this without getting too political?
Well, I'll say very neutral. It's not in the cards yet whether we're going to be a member state or the 51st state. So it's a very uncertain world out there. It's amazing how dynamic things have become, and I think there's a new geopolitical reality. I want to come back to some of Marcus's points, which I want to reiterate. It's not just about adopting standards. There are what I would call international standards that go through the ISO governance process, for example. There's other bodies. There are national standards. So, for example, the organization that I'm with is actually an accredited standards development organization. We have national standards. And then there are industry standards, de facto standards that basically get adopted, like OpenID, for example. A lot of really great stuff. So it's not a fait accompli that just because you've accepted or adopted a standard, that's the way to go. I've personally experienced, I've actually developed standards, I've contributed, I've monitored standards. There's a lot of motivated interests in there. There's a lot of, I would say, the governance processes you have to really keep on top of, really to see if it's actually in your interest or not. There's a lot of dynamics that, if you say that you are going to adopt a standard, you actually have to kind of step back and say, well, what does that really mean? What interests are involved? Is that really in our interests? It's really interesting. I just want to relate an experience from an adjacent area that I've been involved with the model law on electronic transferable records. Basically, if you're not familiar with it, like the UN, the UNCITRAL, for trade and administrative law, has these UN bodies or working groups that develop model laws. So I'm familiar with the model law on electronic transferable records, but also participated in the model law for cross-border identity management. I was involved with that, the delegation, about 3-4 years ago. And at the end of the day, what happens is that you get these quote unquote model laws. It's been for electronic signatures, which I believe the European Union has adopted, Canada has adopted as well. And so you have these fairly neutral instruments that you can actually use as a starting point to actually start fleshing out what your mutual recognition agreements are. So not directly related to digital identity or digital credentials, but digital trade documentation, like electronic bill of lading, so on and so forth. They were really at the forefront, like a number of years back, in developing like blockchain or distributed ledger solutions. And then they ran into problems with, okay, whose platform should we use? What's the technical interoperability? What standard should we use? And then there was the organization called the International Chamber of Commerce that kind of stepped in and actually mediated, convened the various interests to develop technical specifications and so forth. We were brought into the picture about a year ago to develop a self-assessment framework, which we've actually built up a conformity assessment program for vendors can actually self-assess, and we actually verify. What's really interesting is how this is put into force is not by any one government. It's being recognized by what are called the protection and indemnity groups for marine shipping. Like when you ship containers or full ships or whatever, they're underwritten. A lot of the stuff existed before modern governments were even modern states existed. So a lot of these structures are in place. So it's fascinating to see how these international agreements and technical standards are developed. The point that I want to make is that it was from a different starting point. The model law said we focus on reliability first, and interoperability is going to be a quick second, and then legal effect is really the business of the jurisdictions to figure out within their jurisdiction. So for example, the UK and France are taking the work that we've done and actually seeing how it could become a legal effect within their jurisdictions. We also have the table, like China, for example, is there as well. They're trading partners in good faith. They want to be part of the global network as well. So all I'm saying is that there is an approach there that I think we can use that kind of cuts through a lot of the geopolitical noise that's going on right now. The model laws. And in fact, that's one of the things that we're actually looking at right now, is looking at the model law, the various articles for the model law on cross-border identity management. First of all, how might it be put into legal effect within our jurisdiction? That's basically our business to figure out. But then also, what does reliability mean, or program integrity? And then, as an adjunct from that, okay, what are the technical interoperability things that we need to abide by? And it's just a different approach, and it's been very very fruitful in the digital trade documentation world, and I think that's something that we can actually apply in the world that we're within.
That's really interesting, Tim. So essentially, you're saying that the model law could also be encoded into different certifications, but it's is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or at the end of the day, it's not about whether your system's reliable or whether you can interoperate. At the end of the day, within a jurisdiction, is what legal effect does it have? That's the key thing, is that how are your rights protected? How are you protected? How is the jurisdiction that you're within going to actually backstop what you need as an individual or an organization? That's really the business of the jurisdiction to figure out, with its regulations and legislation, its formal governance processes, royal assent, you name it. That really does not extend into another jurisdiction. So for example, we can't tell the Europeans what to do, and vice versa. The Europeans can't tell what Canada do. We're sovereign. We're sovereign states. So, but if we draw from like instruments that were negotiated in a neutral forum, namely the UN or UNCITRAL, and we know that we're working from common values or common intentions, then it's a matter of detail from that point on. Like the difficulty that we have is that if we look at strictly at from the Canadian perspective, we take the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework or our national standards, and then we try to map it to the European context. It's like, okay, well, it kind of maps this way. And you can do it the other way as well. From the European context, EIDAS map it to the Canadian context, but there's no middle ground. So I think this is a fruitful way of actually saying this is a way to do it. The benefit is that you get the rest of the world as well, because not only did you have Europe and the United States and Canada, you had China, you had Singapore, you had a whole range of delegations that were actively involved in the model law, and they're looking to see how to apply it, how to put it in a legal effect within their own jurisdictions. So that's one of the approaches that I am looking at, because I've always seen like the European framework, it's great, it works. It you know, you really can't criticize the choices that they've made, nor would we. Then we look at the Canadian context, it works. In the American context, they're a lot more market driven, a lot more laissez-faire, but it's working. So, you know, we've got like a market driven approach, we've got like a rights driven approach, we have a state driven approach, you know, and the only catalyst that I see that might help us is the model law, which everyone pretty much has agreed to, that once these model laws are developed, this is something that they will actually implement in legislation. We're seeing that with electronic transferable records, like the UK, they have a dashboard of saying, oh, this is how it's being put in effect in the different jurisdictions, and it's an action. Like you know, it's a global trade. You know, the container ships, all the global shipping, it's all in effect.
Thank you, Tim. Sorry about that. A load of people just leaving. Apologies for the noise now. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'd really like to go around the panelists and for you to suggest a concrete pilot project or mutual recognition effort that you think that we should be launching within the next 12 months. And Sebastian, I'm going to start with you, please.
Okay, yeah, I would like to reiterate the 2 interoperability projects that I mentioned before. One is the comparison between EID schemes in the EU with EID schemes, identity schemes in Canada, similar to the report that NIST did together with the EU Commission. I think that was an extremely interesting exercise, and it could also be expanded into the EUDR wallet. And the other is, of course, the equivalent on this electronic signature side, which the EU Commission has driven together with Ukraine in order to get interoperability with qualified electronic signatures. But then I would like to highlight a third topic, actually, and that is in Canada, you have the Canadian Cybersecurity Center, whereas in Europe, we have ENISA, the EU Cybersecurity Agency. And also there is I think possibilities for cooperation, for example, when it comes to risk assessment, incident response teams, and certifications. And in Europe, we have a cybersecurity scheme already, common criteria-based EU cybersecurity scheme, and we're working on an EU cloud certification scheme and the EUDR wallet certification scheme. And also here, there is, I think, room to get interoperability with Canada.
Great, thank you. Scott, how about you?
I shall unmute. Much the same as Sebastian. I mean, there are loads of schemes already. I think we should spend more time developing things like the EU certification scheme for income criteria based. We've got that for cloud, we've got getting it for wallet. We're looking more into supply chain capabilities as well. Just sharing and making those open, I think, is the way forward. And as far as I'm aware, there's nothing stopping that being made public. So more cooperation, more input, we'll get more global acceptance.
Thank you. Marcus.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it would be nice to work on something that is more repeatable and global and universal in nature. I like what Tim said about the model law and about something that's not just a bilateral project, right? It's super valuable to have this initiative and to demonstrate interoperability, let's say, between an EU digital identity and the Canadian one. But what about the next jurisdiction, right? Do we then again have to set up a project and again a working group and then again, so to think a little bit more about more universal approach on the legal and recognition side of which is what I think Tim described, but also on the technical side, right? Could there be a universal translation layer between the technologies and the formats and the wallets? I have two children and they have three nationalities, right? So they can get three different state-issued digital identity wallets, and does that mean, and all of them may use different formats, so does that mean there are three different people? No, it's still one identity that as it works in real life, right? My identity is not dependent on the state. So going back a little bit to the self-sovereign identity principles that would be independent of one state-issued identity or another. So I know it doesn't sound very concrete, but you asked about what to focus on.
No, it was but you were agreeing with Tim. It was about the bigger picture, about bigger frameworks, and about, you know, the legalities. You also then went off into a little bit of more philosophical, you know, what is identity? Is identity nationality or not? And again, that would be a really, really interesting ball to unravel. But unfortunately, we are out of time. I'd really like to thank the four of you for bringing your expertise. I very much hope that, you know, we can continue the conversation offline. And Tim, of course, you know, as I said at the beginning, the purpose of today's panel, in fact, today's event, is to open that collaboration and to find concrete ways in which we can, you know, move the needle collectively. So Tim, Sebastian, Scott, Marcus, thank you very much. A wonderful evening, rest of the day to you, Tim, and Luigi, back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, the panelists. That was really a brilliant roundtable. Thank you for sharing those insights. And now we have the last session of this great event. Now for the closing remark to this event, I will pass the floor to Carlos again and to Costas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luigi. So we are reaching to the end of this this webinar. So yeah, just to say that I found it really interesting. I'm not myself an expert on the topic, but it was fascinating to listen to all the experts, and that's a bit the reason why we organized these webinars, to bring all the government and technical or industry experts around the table, in this case from the EU and Canada. So maybe a couple of remarks. So I think here both the EU Digital Identity Framework and the Canada's Digital Credentials are game-changing initiatives that will improve or offer improved services to citizens, to governments, to business, etc. So I mean, sometimes we are very abstract, but I imagine having all these services at hand in an application or in the phone, right? I mean. I'm really looking forward to get rid of this massive folder that I have with all my university degrees or medical certificates, etc. So I think this is basically the going very concrete or very to the high level what this will bring us. But jokes aside, there seems to be very strong similarities between the EU and Canada approach, as far as I understood. There is a lot of focus on privacy, security, openness, trust, etc., etc. So I think it's good to continue discussing about interoperability of both frameworks. we have something to build upon already. We have the experience from the next generation internet approach, where the colleagues from Affinity Quest and World ID, let's say, explain a bit the cases of cooperation. And I also noted that there is indeed already some strategies on both sides for ensuring global interoperability and compatibility of their frameworks, like the conformity assessment of Canada by the Standards Council of Canada, or the EU strategy for global interoperability with their collaboration with their countries. Then from the panel on standardization, I take that indeed there are a lot of SDOs working on this topic and on other topics as well. It's a very complex landscape. But again, this is one of the reasons why we have all these webinars, to bring clarity to the policymakers, but also to the interested stakeholders. And yeah, I think from the discussions of the panels, I would like to maybe a couple of remarks to try to foster again collaboration and cooperation across the different SDOs. It's normal to have competition, but when we are working on the same topic, we should ensure a certain level of let's say, cooperation and collaboration, and really the importance of having a continuous dialogue between the policymakers, between the technical experts, standardization community, etc., etc. So I will not monopolize this. I think Kostas has probably more expertise and insights on the topic, so I hand over to him for closing this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. It's always challenging to close a workshop after so much expertise and so many knowledgeable people who have shared their expertise to us. But what I would like to say is really a big thanks to all the speakers. A big thanks because this workshop proved that an issue, a topic that could seem or sound very technical, matters in our everyday lives. Digital credentials, digital identities enable us to facilitate our interaction with public administration, or to do things to engage between businesses, to have something with commercial benefit for both citizens and businesses. So one first takeaway, it was very, very interesting to hear and to make it clear that a topic that might sound technical has a very, very concrete use in our everyday lives. I take two things in order not to prolong further this very interesting seminar. First of all, I heard about concrete use cases, and that's what we need to work on further in order to pave the way towards technical interoperability. And second, I was very, very happy to hear about concrete instruments to achieve in the longer term mutual recognition. I was very, very happy to hear about the UN Central Model Law. It is on transferable records and also on cross-border recognition of IDM systems. It is a work that the European Commission has very much been involved in the past. We have been involved in the working groups that team has mentioned, and we think really that it's a good instrument to make use of with universal value. Now, as it was said in the beginning, this is the start of the conversation, or the midterm of the conversation. It will continue. We do not want to have a workshop next year to take stock of what was said the previous year. We want to be quicker. That's why, because we see a real interest from both sides to work concretely on the digital credentials file. So what the European Union has done and has proposed as next step, we have contracted a study which will compare the two frameworks, which I will go further in the mapping of use cases that were mentioned in this workshop to pave the way towards mutual technical interoperability, and also it will explore the mechanism to achieve mutual recognition. The study has already started, and we think that we'll have it finalized until the summer. And when the study will be finalized, then we will have the opportunity to have an on-site workshop here in Ottawa to announce the results of the study. And that's to prepare really concrete deliverables of cooperation under the EU-Canada Digital Partnership in this file. These deliverables could be announced at political level when the appropriate moment will arise. So with that, I would like to thank you all for the participation to this workshop today. Really, it was a pleasure to listening to all of you, to engaging in this very interesting topic for both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Costas. And I'm going to thank you again as well, the participant of this event. Just a few notes. Of course, we're going to publish the recording of this event on the event page together with the slides. And if you want to receive additional updates on Instar and our actions, such as this great event, subscribe to our newsletter. That's a very good channel where you can keep updated. Okay, with that being said, thanks also to all the speakers with your insights that you have contributed to make this event really good. And thank everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luigi. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.